Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, I'm continuing with Perry et al. Study. I have already covered psychology being investigated and background in my previous video. Please watch that video because I am going to assume you have watched it and I'm just going to continue from where I left off in that video. So, if you haven't understood the background of this study, the basics, this will be difficult for you to understand, and I will not be re explaining those concepts in this video. This video is long because there are two experiments in Perry et al. And as always, I'm going to be thorough about it. This is not a quick lesson, this is a detailed lesson. So I feel maybe I will not be able to cover in one video. Maybe I will have to break this down to two videos. But as much as possible, I will cover in this one. Regardless of I make one or two videos, in one part I will be explaining these sections to you, and in the second part we will do question answer practice for questions that can come from this section. So first I'm beginning with the explanation. Aim is directly being derived from the background and the psychology investigated. So the aim of the study was simply to see how oxytocin influences preferred interpersonal distance among people with high and low empathy traits. Following from what we saw in psychology, the researchers feel when oxytocin is released in our body, that will influence how much distance we want. But exactly what influence it will have depends on whether we are a high empathy person or we are a low empathy person. So that is exactly what they want to investigate in this study. Let's come to the research methodology. In a single study, they have done two experiments, two lab-based experiments. You should know right at the outset, these are both computerized experiments. Like they are done fully on the computer. In this study, participants in both experiments, they are just doing some computer tasks. They don't do physical tasks as such. Participants have to do both the tasks, both the experiments which are there. Each participant has to do both experiments. So it is a repeated measures design. Still, to avoid order effects, they have divided participants into two groups to counterbalance the experiments which they have to do. At the beginning only, even if you don't understand what it is, just know the names of the two experiments. Experiment 1 is referred to as CID paradigm experiment. What the CID paradigm is, we will see soon. Experiment 2 is called choosing rooms experiment. This also we'll be seeing right now. You can know that it's called choosing rooms. If I'm a participant in Perry et al., I have to do both. I have to do CID paradigm task also on the computer, and I have to do choosing rooms also. But in which order I have to do it depends on which group I am in. So there are two groups in this study. Group 1, which is half the participants, they have to do experiment 1 first, means they have to do CID paradigm first. And group 2 and this group first they're doing experiment 1, then they have to do experiment 2, means choosing rooms. The order is reversed, like typical counterbalancing for the second group. They have to do experiment 2 first, which is choosing rooms, and then they have to do experiment 1, which is CID paradigm. So this is how they are split. So you can see each participant is doing both. It's not like one group has to do only one task. Do keep that in mind. That's a frequently made mistake on Perry et al. To assume that one participant is doing only one experiment. That's not true. Also, you need to know there's a 1 week gap between both the experiments. So let's say I'm a participant belonging to group 1 in this study. I'll do experiment 1, say today is Monday. Next experiment 2 I'll be doing on next Monday. Same way, if say I'm in group 2 of the experiment, today Monday I will do experiment 2, next Monday I will come back and do experiment 1. So that is how counterbalancing is done. Why we would counterbalance, we will see more in the evaluation, which will be the next video, but I'll give you a rough idea right now. Because order effects can take place, many of the participants first time they must be doing a computerized task when they came in the first week. So regardless of which experiment they are doing, first time they must be doing something like a computer task in the lab. So they become practiced at it. They become better at it, though the tasks are different. But the next week when they come, they will be better able to manage doing a task on the computer just because they've done it once the week before. So if everyone does, say, CID paradigm the first time, in the first week they tell all of them to do CID paradigm. So they all gain some practice because they all learn, okay, how to do computer task in the lab. Then all of them next time they come to doing choosing rooms. Then their performance will get affected by the practice which they have done the first time. Like they'll be able to manage the choosing rooms task better than they manage the CID task because they've gained practice, not because there's something special about the choosing rooms task. So to prevent them that from happening, from all of them to improve only in one task, and then we can't make out it's because of practice or it's because we have given a different task, that confusion will take place. So to prevent all this from happening, they've made sure half of them have to do choosing room second and half of them have to do CID paradigm second. So in case some practice is taking place, it will take place in both conditions. Like the first set of participants, they'll show the effect of practice in choosing rooms. And the second set of participants, they will show the effect of practice in CID paradigm. So it'll become clear to us, okay, they're always improving no matter what the second task is to be done, must be they have got practice. It doesn't depend on the task because the tasks are different, still they are showing improvement out of practice. So in this way, we are able to see if any practice effects are occurring. And that's why this type of counterbalancing has been done. Like I mentioned, more we get to see in evaluation. So let's just move ahead with what else is there in this study. Why they've taken a lab experiment? Definitely because they want to control extraneous variables. We know lab experiments are done for the sake of control to prevent confounding. Which type of confounding could have taken place and all, we'll keep on seeing ahead. Also, they are telling us that researchers, they wanted to compare the dependent variable is interpersonal distance, how much people distance one from others across many groups and conditions. If we look at the aim of the study, only one, they want to see how oxytocin influences interpersonal distance and they also want to see empathy. So of course they'll have to make comparisons to see what are the effects. So now let's see which comparisons they have made. The first comparison they have made between people getting oxytocin and those getting placebo in this study. Researchers want to know when oxytocin levels increase in our body, does it make us want to have more or less distance from others? So, in this study, they have administered oxytocin from the outside to some participants. It has the same effect as if oxytocin would be naturally released in the body. The same way administering it from outside will influence what impact it has on participants. Now, whenever we do these type of studies in psychology, more you'll get to see in A2, but you can know right now the group which gets whatever we are targeting, like mainly we want to see the effect of oxytocin on distance. That group is said to be a treatment group. We cannot have only a treatment group in the study. We have to have a control group also. I'll give you the simple logic of this. Supposing, let's take a different example. I've made a medicine for depression. I give the medicine to one group of people for 5 months. And they show improvement. After taking my medicine, their depression starts reducing. Can I say that because of my medicine, their depression has shown improvement? Not necessary, because in this 5 months' time, just because of passage of time, maybe people are showing improvement. With time, changes can take place. Or maybe some other things are happening on the outside besides taking my medicine that they are showing improvement. So improvement can come from many sources, not only from the medicine. So if I just take one group, give them some treatment, because I'm interested in effect of medicine on depression. So that's the treatment which I'm giving them. I can make wrong conclusions. I can assume my treatment is effective when it is not. That is why I need to have a control group. I need to have one group of people who are not getting the medicine I need to follow them for 5 months, and I need to see, are they showing any improvement. If say they are also showing improvement, that means my treatment is not effective. Anyways, people were going to become better. But if they don't show any improvement after 5 months, their depression is the same. Only my medicine group's depression has improved. Then I can say that my medicine is effective. This is basic reasoning. You should know why in these type of experiments in which we are giving people something, some treatment and seeing the effect of that, we always have to have a control group. So now making this logic relevant to this study, if I'm having two group, I want to see the effect of oxytocin on distance. I need to have one group who does not take oxytocin, and I need to see what distance would they prefer. Because if say they are taking oxytocin, let's assume they don't want to have too much distance from others. They want to come close to others after taking oxytocin. But how do I know anyways how close do they want to be to others? I need to have some control group with which I can compare. Then I can say, okay, normally supposing 5 feet distance from others. But under oxytocin only, they want 2 feet distance from others. So oxytocin reduces how much distance people want from others. Then I can conclude if I have some comparison with the other group. Otherwise, any distance, if I assume like a 2 feet distance is because of oxytocin, not necessary. Anyways, people could have wanted that distance from others. So that's why a control group is important. Oxytocin, we've already seen it's an actual chemical in the body, does cause some social influence on us. Saline solution is plain salt water. It has no medicine, it has no medicinal properties, it cannot influence our social behavior. So it's like very empty or plain treatment which we are giving people. So it's just known as a control group. Now, oxytocin, how it is taken is one mistake students make. They say in perietol, oxytocin was injected. It was not injected. It had to be taken via nasal drops. This is a core study. Every piece of information is very important. Anything can be asked in the paper. So if loosely you're going to write injection was given, you lose a mark the moment you say that. You have to know exactly it was nasal drops that were given. That also they have defined very specifically ahead how nasal drops were given, how many drops in how much solution. They can ask you all those details in the paper. So do not take the approach that you can just read a summary or you can ignore details which are seeming to be excessive. You cannot. Anything can be asked. So you have to know it is via nose drops that they took it. So when participants were taking oxytocin or placebo, no, right now only they did not know which one they are taking. You must have learned about randomized controlled trials and blinding in your research methods. So your participants were blind, meaning that if I am a participant, I'm just given a bottle from which I have to put drops in my nose. I don't know what is in that bottle. There's no label, so I don't know whether I'm taking oxytocin or placebo. It is a repeated measures design. Again, students confuse over here. In Perry et al., they make lot of mistakes. Students feel that participants either had to take oxytocin or saline. That's not true. Each participant has taken both. So if I am a participant, either for experiment 1 or 2, because I'm doing both. So for either of these, I'll have to take oxytocin, and for either of these, I will have to take placebo. So in one experiment, I will be doing it after taking oxytocin, and the other experiment, I'll be doing it after taking placebo. So this is also repeated measures design. Also, what researchers have done, even here, order effects can take place similar to what I've explained for experiments 1 and 2. So they randomly assign participants to whether they will get oxytocin first or the saline solution first. Supposing I'm the participant in this study, and I have to do experiment 1 in the first week and experiment 2 in the second week. That is how I have been assigned. Now, for which of these will I take oxytocin and for which of these will I take saline? That is randomly decided. So researchers they must have put everyone's names on chit, shuffled it. Okay, this participant's name has come. So this one has to take oxytocin first and saline. So for me, I will have to do oxytocin for experiment 1 in the first week. and saline for experiment 2 in the second week. All combinations are possible. Let's say there's one more participant. They get to do experiment 2 in the first week under oxytocin, experiment 1 in the second week under saline. Then there's a third participant. They get to do experiment 1 in the first week under saline and experiment 2 in the second week under oxytocin. So which experiment we have to do in the first and second week? Anyone can get any order. And whether we have to take oxytocin or saline for the first or the second experiment, anyone can get in any order. So it's all randomly decided. As I mentioned previously, after 1 week, participants had to return and do the alternate treatment for whichever experiment they were doing second. Remembering these details, every detail is very important. So exactly you have to remember there's 1 week gap between doing both the experiments. Study is double blind. I've already explained participants blinding too. As a participant, I don't know. I'm getting oxytocin or placebo. In the same way, the assessor does not know which treatment the participant has got. In these type of studies, there are always two researchers. Otherwise, students don't understand how can the researcher don't know who's getting oxytocin, who's getting placebo. Otherwise, how will they keep track of which treatment they gave whom and what effect it had? So always there are two researchers in these type of studies. One researcher knows who's getting what. One researcher has a proper list. Say participant 1 is getting this in this week, this in second. They know exactly all the names of the participants, what treatment they're getting. They have the full record with them. Then there is the second researcher who goes to actually conduct the study with the participants. This researcher just knows the roll numbers of participants. They don't know the names of the participants, and they just take those bottles with them and give them to the participants. Even this researcher who's giving the bottle, they have just been told give this bottle to this participant, this bottle to that participant. Even they don't know which one they are giving to which participant. So the one who's actually conducting the study in practice, that researcher is blind. There is another primary researcher who knows everything, who's getting what, they have kept record of that. So this researcher who's going for the administration of the treatment, they don't know. So I'm the researcher, I'm giving the participant one bottle, I don't know what is in the bottle, even the participant does not know. The other researcher knows, he's told me to give it. Why this is important, again we see more in evaluation, but you can know because supposing I knew, here I don't know, but if I did, so I knew I'm giving oxytocin to this participant in front of me. I might have, through my body language, unintentionally conveyed something to the participant, which helps them to know they're getting the treatment type of solution. So maybe I'm just like nodding a little more or making a little more eye contact, which shows them that the thing I'm giving them is more serious. It's not just plain salt water. So I might say it out or unintentionally, I might give out some cue which tells them that they are the ones getting the treatment. To prevent that from happening, I should not know what I'm giving to the participants. When both participant and the researcher, both are blind to what the participant is getting, this is called double blind study. It really increases the validity because like we saw that confounding can't take place from body cues or interactions. More we get to see in evaluation. So this is the first independent variable. This is manipulated by the researchers. Sometimes in the papers they do that. Like for Pozzuolo, they have been asking what variable was manipulated. Manipulated means which the researcher actually changed or controlled. It is oxytocin because the researchers decided which participants will get oxytocin, which will get placebo, and they are administering that. But there's another independent variable which the researchers could not manipulate. They could not change it, they could only study it as it existed. So, this is the independent variable which was not manipulated. In the question paper, if they are asking you very specifically, name the independent variable which was manipulated. You can't freely give any one. You will only have to give oxytocin. In the same way, if they ask you which was not manipulated, you have to only give empathy. You cannot give the other one. So make sure you know which variable is of which type. Coming to empathy level, empathy is a naturally existing variable. It is something that is there in the personality of a person. We cannot change it or create it in the laboratory. So all researchers could do is they could identify which participant is having high empathy and which participant is having low empathy. So they categorized or divided participants based on their results on an empathy scale into two groups. This scale is called interpersonal reactivity index. It is very important to memorize the name of the scale, how many items are there, how classification is done into high and low groups. You have to know that because these very fine details can be asked in the paper. So, first, do not in the paper keep on using the term IRI. Many students they just keep on writing IRI. You have to always give the full name of the scale at least once in your answer. So first you write interpersonal reactivity index in the bracket IRI like it's given here, then you can keep referring to it as IRI. This scale has 28 items, 28 statements and questions are there in total, and it has to be answered online. Just like all the tasks in the study have to be done online, in the same way, even the scale has to be answered online. It's a questionnaire. Now, in this scale, whatever total scores are there, we don't know, but whoever gets above 40, they are said to have high empathy. So, it's like a cutoff. If I answer the scale, I get above 40, I'm a high empathy person. We have to memorize the cutoffs also. And if I get less than 33, or I get exactly 30, so 33 and below is low empathy. Now, what about we'll say 34 to 39 range? What if people are getting those scores? Then they're falling neither in high nor in low empathy, like it's not clear on which side they are. They seem to be somewhere in middle. That's why you'll see in Perry et al. Some places they've mentioned there were 54 participants, some places they've mentioned there were 40. Because originally the researchers started with 54 participants, then they got 20 who scored more than 40. They are not controlling. The participants answered in a way that they got more than 40, they went to the high empathy group. And then there were 20 who got distributed into the low empathy group. The way they answered the IRI, their scores came in the low empathy category. So that's like 40 participants. 14 participants must be such who were getting between 34 and 39, which falls neither in high empathy nor in low empathy. So those participants were eliminated from the study. That's why though they started with 54, in the end they just had 40 on the basis of empathy. Now participants could belong to only one group, either high or low empathy. They cannot be both. Like the same person cannot be high and low on empathy. So this is an independent measures design. Participants will be either in this group or that. Whereas oxytocin, placebo, we saw they are getting both. It's not like they're either in oxytocin or placebo. Both they are doing. So oxytocin is repeated measures. Just remember that. But empathy is independent measures. So for Perry et al., if they ask you what is the experimental design, they will specify for which independent variable they are asking, and you have to mention accordingly. Okay, now these are some initial like preliminaries what we've seen about the study. Now some preliminaries specific to the experiments also we have to see before we can see the procedure. This is by far the more complicated study in the syllabus, even more than Pozzuolo. It's easy, it's very easy to understand this one, but it's just that it's a little lengthy, so very patiently you have to learn about it. In the first experiment, that is like I've told you, CID paradigm experiment, computerized interpersonal distance paradigm. In this experiment, participants had to indicate how much distance they want from others using a computer animation. Like, animations today are very common in computers. Some moving object will be there. So that type of a task was there. We will see in the procedure what was the task. Some moving object is coming on the screen. The way participants respond to that moving object, that shows how much distance they like from others. Now in this experiment 1, we know both the independent variables we've seen before, they are playing a role because some participants are doing this experiment under oxytocin. Some are doing it under placebo. Also, we know that some participants who are answering this experiment, they are high on empathy, some who are answering are low on empathy. So those IVs are applicable to this experiment. But also one more independent variable is introduced, which is only in this experiment, which is not in the choosing room, it's not in the next one. So one IV which is exclusive to this experiment, you have to remember that. Which type of a moving object is being shown on the screen? Now I will give you a very rough explanation of this task. Finally, we will see later. In this experiment, participants see a computer screen, like they're sitting in front of this computer screen. On the screen, right at the center, is a stick figure. They are told to imagine that this is them. The stick figure represents them. So if I'm doing this experiment, I have to look at the computer. This person, the stick figure standing in the middle, is me. That is what I have to imagine. Now what happens is, I'm looking at myself on the screen and starts approaching from some side or corner of the screen. One figure will start coming towards me. Like this is the animation. This figure comes and starts moving slowly towards me. It looks as if the figure is walking towards me. What I have to do is, at what point I am comfortable with this figure being close to me, I have to press the space bar. So let's say this figure is coming slowly towards me, and I want this figure to stop here. I don't want this figure to come closer because I'm imagining this is really me. So really, if someone had to come this, like even closer than this to me, even closer than the point at which I'm stopping, I would not like that. I would get intimidated. So I want the person to stop right there. So I have to press the space bar to stop the figure. Okay, so this is the task. This is the CID task. There are many trials on this task. Like say this is one trial, one time that I have pressed the spacebar and stopped the figure. Then again I have to look at the screen, again that stick figure is there. Now let's say this is the second trial, the second time that I'm doing this task. Let's say this time a figure is coming from here. Now this figure which is coming, I don't mind it coming right next to me. So I don't want to stop this figure very early. I want it to stop right next to me, like almost sticking to me. So I have to press the space bar when that figure is sticking to me. At that point, I have to press to indicate I'm comfortable with the person coming this close. This is, like I told you very crudely, what the CID paradigm is. I have to keep on looking at the screen, imagining myself, seeing various figures coming on different tiles, different figures are coming towards me, and I have to press the spacebar to stop the figure at a point which I don't want them to exceed. I don't want them to come closer than that to me. Now, why will I want some figures to come closer and some figures to be far away? Because the figures must be different, that's why. So that is what they've manipulated in this experiment. Sometimes when the figure is coming, I am told that it's a stranger. So just like I have to imagine myself as the central figure, I have to imagine that this one who's coming near me is a stranger. So on some trials, it's a stranger coming. So most probably I want to stop them far away because I don't want a stranger coming too close. I'm imagining as if it's real. In real, I wouldn't like a stranger coming too close. Sometimes on some trials, I'm told to imagine it's an authority figure. Authority figure is just someone who's senior to us in a more powerful position than us. So say I'm imagining it's a teacher or a boss or somebody who's coming close to me. On some trials, I have to imagine that person coming close is a friend. And on some trials, I have to imagine it's a ball. In fact, on those trials, it looks also like a ball. Like then it doesn't look like a stick figure. On those trials, it'll just be a circle which is coming towards me. Why ball is included and all, we'll see in the evaluation because we'll feel what ball has to do with social distance. It's a control condition which we will see ahead. So what are they manipulating in this experiment in particular? Which figure I am imagining on the screen is coming close to me? 4 types of figures can be there: stranger, authority figure, friend and ball. So this is one IV manipulated exclusively in this study. This part of a study also uses a repeated measures design. We should not assume that some participants get to see only a stranger coming towards them and different participants are there who get to see only a friend coming towards them. No. Every participant does many trials, like I have said. So On some trials they have to imagine strangers coming towards them, on some trials they have to imagine friend is coming, on some trials authority, on some trials ball. Means if I'm the participant, I'll get to see all types of trials, all types of figures coming towards me. So it is a repeated measures design. Of course, there's a lot more to this experiment which we get to see in the procedure, but these are the basics. Here mainly they wanted to show us what is the IV which is manipulated only in this experiment. Same way they are telling us in experiment 2 also there are some exclusive variables which we need to know about. Again, very crudely, I'll just explain what is the task which participants had to do in experiment 2. In experiment 2 also they are sitting in front of a computer screen. So let's say this is the computer screen. In this experiment, the computer screen is divided into a left half and a right half. There is one photograph in the left half. Either you can look at the original research paper or you can look at any of the textbooks. I think all the textbooks, all the 3 textbooks have a diagram of this as far as I remember. So what the participant has to do, they have to see 2 photographs in which there will be 2 chairs which are facing each other in both the photographs, on the left also, on the right also. So there are 2 chairs which are positioned in front of each other, and there is a table and a plant. Which is there in the photographs. The photographs are not exactly identical, like the left and right photographs are not exactly the same. There is some difference between them. One or the other thing will be varying. Let's say, for example, in the left, the chairs which are there, they are almost sticking to each other, like they're really, really close. But on the right photograph, the chairs are little more distant from each other. The space between the chairs is little more. So as such, everything is the same. Colors, type of chair, all that is the same. It's just the distance is little different in both the photographs. Or it can be the chairs are at the same distance, but the table and plant which are there, in one photograph they are close to each other, in the other they are far. So either one of these things will be manipulated. Either the distance between the chairs or the distance between the table or plant, or in some cases the angle between the chairs. Why these things are manipulated, we'll see ahead. Angle means are they like right facing each other or little bit tilted from each other. That is manipulated. For now, we can just know what participants have to do in this study. They are told that they are going to meet another participant after they complete this experiment too. They have to meet somebody, and with them they have to discuss some personal topics. They are not told what those personal topics are. So participants have to imagine that really this will be the layout of the room, whichever layout they select. That is the way the room will be laid out when they go to meet that other person with whom they will have to discuss some personal matters. So in this case, they're imagining that really they have to meet a stranger. This is not going to happen, it's deception. But participants believe that really they have to meet someone. And it's a stranger because they're not told who the other person will be, it'll just be a participant. So from that point of view, that they'll actually have to be seated in one of these rooms, they are clicking a photograph, which one they will want, what arrangement they will want. So of course, how much distance they choose to maintain between the chairs. That will show how much distance they like from a stranger. That is what this experiment is about. So it's called the choosing rooms experiment. There are 2 dependent variables in this thing, like 2 things are being measured about the participant. One, what is the mean average preferred distance between furniture items? Here, instead of saying the chairs, why they are saying furniture items? Because sometimes it could be that participant is selecting the distance between table and plant rather than the chairs. Sometimes, like we saw in both the photographs, the chairs are at the same distance. They have to judge on the basis of table and plant is close or far, that which one layout they want. So different furniture items are there, which one they want to select, they have to select. There are many trials on the second experiment also. It's not that once they see 2 photographs and they select and it's over, one after the other. Many times, like 2 photographs keep on coming. So there are many trials and they have to keep on selecting one photograph from the 2. So many selections they make in this experiment. Sometimes the chair distances are varying, sometimes table plant distances are varying, and sometimes the preferred angle between the chairs is varying. So that is the second thing that is being measured. Like, do participants like a certain angle, like squarely facing each other, or they like little bit tilting from each other? That is also being measured. As I've mentioned here, the instructions are important because participants are imagining something very specific, that they will have to have a personal conversation with another participant. From that point of view, they are selecting the photographs, not from an aesthetics point of view. Here, we will wonder why we have to see table and plant distance, like what that has to do with interpersonal distance, because after all we are going to be sitting on the chairs, not on the table and plant. So how does that matter, or with how much distance we want from another person? That is a control condition, as we will see ahead. Just for aesthetic sake, someone would want to have more distance. So we want to make sure it's not because of aesthetics that they want more distance, it is actually their preferred distance from another person. That's why we are going to compare. Anyways, do they keep a table and plant very far from each other? That would show that for aesthetics they like to maintain distances. So we can check with the help of how much distance they keep between table and plant, which is unrelated to interpersonal distance. More we will see ahead. Now, this is the final independent variable in the study. Of course, this is the exclusive only to experiment 2. In experiment 1, the task is only different. It's about the moving figure. So this independent variable is not applicable there. What is the independent variable? Whether the distance is between the chairs or between the table and plant. This is what they've manipulated here. Here also it is a repeated measures design. I think in the Hodder textbook there's a very good summary table, and I strongly recommend you revise from there all the different IVs which we have seen on this study, and what are the experimental designs corresponding to them, they have summarized in that table. So as far as this IV is concerned, chairs or plant and table, it is repeated measures, because like I said, every participant has to make many selections on the choosing rooms. So they get to see both. Sometimes they get to see the chairs at varying distances, sometimes they get to see table and plant at varying distances. So we saw, I'm just quickly summarizing, like I said, a very neat table is in the textbook. I'm just doing it roughly. The first IV was oxytocin or placebo. What is the treatment the participant is getting? This is on repeated measures design, because every participant is getting both oxytocin and placebo for different experiments. Second IV was empathy, which could be high or low. This is on independent measures design, because the same participant cannot have high and low empathy. It has to be different. So two different groups are there. Third IV is only in CID paradigm first experiment, which is the type of figure. It's also called type of protagonist, which is approaching the central figure. Right now I'm just using the easy term type of figure which is approaching. This was at 4 levels, like we saw. It could be a authority figure, a friend, a stranger, or a ball. This is on repeated measures design, because there are many trials on this experiment and every participant has to see all 4 types of figures. And there is IV4, which is only for the choosing rooms experiment, and that is the type of distance which has to be judged. So we saw that it could either be the distance between chairs, or it could be the distance between table and plant. You can call it type of distance, or you can say nature of the furniture items. That was what was manipulated. This is also on repeated measures design, because all sorts of participants have to do it. Many trials are there. Every participant gets to see both chair distance and table and plant distance. So this is a summary of the independent variables. Now let's look at the sample. Now there are either 56 or 54 participants in the study. Different textbooks have given different figures. Now even I'm getting confused in the original paper. I think it is 54 participants were there. I think 56 is wrongly reported. And I think in fact this is given in the Hodder textbook 56. But then they've revised it, and in some, because my students told me, some of the students told me in their book it's written 54. So some books they have revised it and they have made a correction. So it is 54 participants are there in Perry et al. They are all from University of Haifa, Israel. At a minimum, we should remember they are from Israel, even if we don't remember the name of the university. It is important to remember which nation they are from. They are between 19 to 32 years of age. Just memorize all these figures. When they ask you sample characteristics, total number counts as one, undergraduates counts as another, university counts as third, age counts as fourth, that way. One trend I'm seeing a lot in students, I don't know you want to say 1 second of your time or what it is. Like always say have the larger picture in mind, like don't get into petty things. They will not try to remember any characteristics of the study and very general things they will start giving. Like not for this study but for other studies. Both males and females were there. That is one characteristic. All were healthy. They did not have any mental issues. That is a second characteristic. That approach will not help you. You have to know specific sample characteristics from a study. Yes, here you can say only males are there because gender is important in this study. The fact that females are not there is an important characteristic of the sample. But if you think now I'll be very smart and in every study I'm just going to say males were there and females were there, that will not always count as a sample characteristic because it's too generic. You have to say how many males and how many females were there. So even in this study, though you can say only males were there as a characteristic, I strongly recommend you say 54 males were there as a characteristic. Be very specific. Saving one minute of your time to like not remember a figure which is given in the study is not helpful. I know the argument you will make is, but I have a lot of portion to remember. So no one is telling you to give special efforts to memorize. You can just read it. When you do your answer writing practice, automatically you remember. You will have to study at some level, right? You can't leave studying at all. And you can memorize, like brush up whatever you have been learning throughout the year just before the psychology paper. So there is no excuse for not learning exactly. You have to learn exactly. There's no option also. Because what happens is, if you feel that here you will learn, say only males are there, you won't try to remember the exact number. It is not only if they ask you sample characteristic that you need to report these figures. Even when you do evaluation, like for a 10 marker, you do a peel format evaluation. To make your points effective, to get 10 out of 10, you have to be able to write the specifics. So, supposing one argument you're making is that the sample size is small, you have to be able to quote how many participants were there. You have to be able to say exactly there were 54, out of which 14 were eliminated. That's why the sample size is small. Unless you give details like this, you don't get high marks on the 10 marker. So for that also you have to learn sample details, not just for sample characteristics. And if you think there also avoid it, I'll avoid it. What if the main issue they ask you to discuss in the 10 mark is generalizability? Then what will you do? If it's a forced issue, you will have to cover it. So be long sighted and don't try to save time over petty things, losing very high potential marks in the paper. Be wise in how you study. The key to everything, like I say, the underlying mechanism behind everything is to do your answer writing practice. Because if you keep on practicing, like I just gave you the example, you keep on practicing writing, say, points on generalizability and all, when you write it, automatically it gets registered that there are 54. You won't forget. Try it and see it. You won't have to specially remember that there were 54 participants. Automatically you'll remember because you've written it, you have practiced it. So there's no special effort that you have to put into remembering sample characteristics unless you're taking that bad approach of trying to memorize separately and not doing any answer writing practice. Then you will have to do such things and then it feels heavy to remember what was there. Besides this, they're telling us participants are volunteer participants in this study. Some of them are like psychology students who get course credit for participation. So for their participation, that is what they got in exchange. So they're a type of paid volunteers. They're getting something. Some of them who were not those students would get course credit. So not from the psychology course. They were given some money for compensating for their time. So participants, we don't know exactly who got what, but some of them got course credits and some of them got money for their participation. So they are all paid volunteers. Now, when it comes to these studies in which we are doing some biological manipulation, although this is under the social approach, but there is biological manipulation of oxytocin. We need to mention the handedness of participants. So you will see in Holzel et al. Also they have specified handedness. Why handedness is important? Because in biology there's a very simple principle, behavioral biology. What you will see is some of us have more dominance in the right hemisphere of the brain, the right side, which is towards the right ear, and some of us have more dominance in the left hemisphere of the brain, which is on the left side. Means for some of us our right hemisphere is controlling more of what we do, and for some of us the left hemisphere. One idea you get is from the handedness. Those who are right handed, like you use your right hand for most of your work, most probably almost 100% it is your left hemisphere which is more dominant, it does most of your work. Those who are left handed, it is your right hemisphere which does most of your work. This is not to say that the other hemisphere is not working. Like I said, most of the work, especially the academic type of work. Now that's a different topic altogether, but what I want to drive in here is most people in the population are right handed. For most people, left hemisphere is dominating. Fewer people are left handed for whom the right hemisphere is dominating. Now, if I give someone some biological treatment, like in this study, they are giving oxytocin. It is important to note whether they are right or left handed, because if they are right handed, that effect of oxytocin will go towards more of the left hemisphere of their brain. That is where oxytocin will show effect. Whereas if they are left handed, oxytocin will show an effect on the right hemisphere. So when we are trying to generalize the results, because we know sample is all about generalizability. If there are more right-handed people, that means more left hemisphere dominated people, the results are more likely to apply to them, because the way oxytocin influenced participants in this study, whatever influence we'll see, that will apply to those who are right-handed, because that's how oxytocin influences the left hemisphere of the brain. Very few are left-handed in this study, right hemisphere dominated. So results will not generalize very much to people who are left-handed in the population. So that's why they're telling us only 5 are left-handed. None of them had psychiatric or neurological conditions. They are mentally healthy. So again, in terms of generalizability to all people in the population with good mental health, without any illnesses, we can generalize the results. Again, important to note, because oxytocin is going to impact the brain. Neurological conditions means brain conditions, so they are not having anything. And they had normal or corrected to normal vision. Vision is important. This is a computerized study. Entire everything from the questionnaire to the tasks are being done on the computer. So, and the figures are little minuscule, like there's a small stick figure, something is approaching. So if someone did not have proper vision, they could not track movement properly, or the figures are too small for them to be able to see, then we would not have confidence in the way they have performed. Like, have they performed in a way that we can generalize or not? So they have made sure that people either have normal vision, or say if they have myopia or something, they are wearing eyeglasses when they are doing the study. Okay, so that is about the sample. Now let's come towards the procedure, actually step by step, what is being done in the study. We know that each participant has to come twice in this study. Once, 1 week for one experiment, 1 week for the other. Now, first, what they've given under the procedure is common for both weeks. Like in each week, when they come, first they have to undergo this procedure. Then they have given specific to which experiment they have come to do, what they had to do. First, when a participant came to the laboratory, week 1 or week 2, they had to come at the same time. We don't know exactly what is the time, but let's say they are coming at 8 a.m. on the first Monday that they're doing the experiment. Then 8 a.m. they have to come on the next week also. They have fixed the time, means they've standardized. Keep noting mentally. Like I say, when you're learning something, keep on noting what are the figures. In fact, you can make small annotations like this. Because no doubt in evaluation, again in the textbooks, they give you examples. This was standardized. But why not keep noting over here? It will help you. It will make your answer writing easy, because as you're going through, you're registering in your mind what is standardized. So at the time of writing an evaluation point, very quickly you'll be able to put it down. In their first visit, that means when they have come to the lab, say they have registered at 8 o'clock, they are told that they're going to get either one treatment. They don't know which one, but they just tell them we'll be giving you some treatment. So now they have to take nasal drops as soon as they come to the lab. Now here it is very important to memorize exactly the details they have given. Anything can be asked from you. We know it is a random assignment. Whether I as a participant am getting oxytocin or placebo, that is randomly decided. No matter which I am taking, I have to take a bottle which is like 250 ml saline is there in that bottle, salt water is there. And in that, if I am taking oxytocin, if I'm in the oxytocin condition, in this 250 ml saline, there are 24 units of oxytocin. You can think of it as 24 drops of oxytocin. But in the paper, write units because we don't know exactly what is the measurement of the units. Say I'm in the placebo condition, I'm not in the oxytocin, then I am just given a bottle with 250 ml saline. There is no units of oxytocin in the bottle. So here again you see standardization. Regardless of which condition I'm in, the bottle is going to look the same. They must have made the appearance of the bottle same. And inside also how much quantity I can see of the liquid, that is also kept the same. So there will be no impact of no differences because of how much liquid could be seen or the way the bottle was. They have made sure that all does not make the procedure inconsistent. Now what I have to do is whatever has been given to me, 3 drops I have to put on each nostril. Just like with that dropper, we put our head up and we put 3 drops into the nostril. That's what they had to do. It was self-administered. It's not like the researcher put it in the nose of the participants. The participants had to put it themselves. And we have to memorize each nostril. Means on the right nostril, 3 drops, and on the left nostril, 3 drops. They had to put. Same thing on the second visit also, like say in week 1, I took oxytocin like this. On the next week, again, same thing. They will give me the bottle. This time it will be saline. I don't know which it is, but they've given me saline. I have to put it 3 drops on each nostril. So this is the very first thing that participants do when they come to the laboratory for either experiment. Next, they have to answer the questionnaire, which we had seen before. One thing you should know, oxytocin takes some time to reach from the nose till the brain. It takes some time to travel and then to have an impact on the brain, like to get properly distributed in the brain. So anyways, participants will have to wait for some time. They can't immediately start doing the computer task. That's not possible because immediately oxytocin will not influence how they are doing the task. We won't be able to see the impact of oxytocin. So they are waiting anyways for oxytocin to reach the brain. In that time, they have to answer the questionnaire, the IRI, so that researchers can understand whether they are high or low in empathy. After they have answered the IRI, another 45 minutes they have to wait. So roughly you can understand about 1 hour. Say 15 minutes it's taking them to answer the IRI. Another 45 minutes they have to wait in a quiet room, standardized quiet room for everybody, no distractions. And there are some magazines are given to them so that they don't get bored and fatigued. These are purposely nature magazines. This is a control. Firstly, they made sure the participants sat in isolation without anybody else. So there was no other participant or experimenter around them. And they've given them a magazine also, not like a film magazine or a social magazine, a nature, non-social magazine. Because they don't want, like say for example, if they're reading something about the films, they're reading some gossip or something while they're waiting, that can impact whether they want to be close or far from others. Because say they read something very terrible news, some film star cheated on some other film star, like how nowadays gossip goes on, then that will make them aversive towards other, like they'll get primed towards becoming aversive to the other people. Then when they go to do their task, then they will want more distance from others, not because of oxytocin, because what they read in the magazine. So to make sure all that things don't happen, to prevent confounding of that sort, they have been made to read very neutral nature magazines, like wildlife type of magazines, which have nothing to do with interpersonal distance. And in the meanwhile, oxytocin levels are stabilizing in their brain. So that is also like a proper control. They've taken care not to start the experiment immediately, let the oxytocin settle down so that we can see exactly how oxytocin influences task performance. Now, this is what they have to do before any experiment. But now, what they have to do specifically for experiment one. Now, we are going to see that. So, experiment one is the CID paradigm. CID stands for computerized interpersonal distance. I've already given you a rough idea of what is done. Now, I'll explain to you very specifically what is done. For this, I strongly recommend either you look at the Cambridge textbook, Professor Roberts' textbook, or you look at the original research paper. For the diagram, I think Hodder textbook is missing the diagram, and diagram is very helpful to understand this section. First, if I'm the participant in experiment one, like let's say right now I have to do experiment one, they will seat me in front of a computer. They maintain a standardized distance, like at how much distance each participant has to sit from the computer. So where the chair is, they have to sit at that distance. I can't move my chair, and I have to start looking at what is there on the computer. The first thing which will come on the computer is a word. Now the word can be either friend, stranger, authority figure, or ball. Participants have already been instructed and explained that whichever word comes, supposing friend comes, you have to imagine that next, that figure which is going to come towards you, it's going to be your friend. You have to imagine a friend is coming towards you. So this all has already been explained to them, that see, you are going to be there at the center, there's a person coming. So they know that if friend comes, the first thing they'll have to imagine that it's a friend which is walking towards them. So on some trials, it would be friend would be written. On some trial, instead of friend, stranger is written, or authority figure, or ball. Like that's something used to be written. This screen is shown for 1 second. You have to remember exactly for Perry et al. Study what is coming on the screen and for how long. Both you have to know. After this, what happens is, okay, I'm seeing the screen for 1 second, it flashes, then it goes away, what I've seen. Next, what comes on the screen is a fixation point. A fixation point means literally a point or a dot right at the center of the screen. So the word friend or whichever word was there has been replaced by a fixation dot. Now they've already told me that when the dot comes, you just have to stare at it. So for how long the dot is there, I just have to keep on staring at it. This dot is shown for 0.5 seconds. Why they show this dot and all? Just to give the participant a little room to register what had come before. Before they can start the animation, the participant should be ready to imagine that friend. And it makes sure that participant is not distracted, not looking here and there, they are fixed on the screen. So they'll be able to do the task with full attention. Then after 0.5, that's half a second, this also goes away. Like this is just flashed and gone away. Now comes on the screen the animation. So now comes a stick figure, which I've already been told I have to imagine this is me. And this is a circular type of animation. Like when the participant is looking at the computer, it looks like there is a circular room. So here I have drawn it like this. Like I said, please look at the original pictures. It will be easier for you to understand. The Perry et al. Study paper is freely available. So if it's not in your textbook, freely it is available on the internet. You can download the PDF copy and see how the photographs were shown. So now after that fixation cross is gone, I can see myself at the middle of the circle. So this is representing the participant. Like I said, it's representing me. Then comes a stick figure which is animated, simply meaning it is moving, that starts moving towards me. It starts coming towards the center. This figure which is coming towards me is called a protagonist. So the friend, stranger, authority figure, or ball, either which is coming towards me, it is referred to as protagonist. It can come from one of 8 doors. Now what do they mean by one of 8 doors? On some trials, that protagonist will start coming from the corner of the screen, means it will start coming from here. On some trials, it will come from the center top of the screen. Means from where it starts coming, what is the source of origin of the protagonist, they are calling the door. Sometimes it comes from here, sometimes here, sometimes here. I'm showing all 8 over here, but you have to know from any one of these, they will be coming on one trial. So these are the 8 doors from which the protagonist can come. On every trial, there used to be a different door from which the protagonist was coming. Why they've manipulated this again as a form of control. It should not be based on where the figure is coming from that the participant is getting influenced on how much distance they want. It should be the figure. Like we saw, it should be it's a friend, so they want more or less distance, or it's a stranger, so they want more or less distance. It should not be if the figure comes from a corner, regardless of it's a stranger or friend, they want it to be far away. And if it's coming from the side, they want it to be close, regardless of what it is. So that where the figure is coming from does not become a confounding variable. They've just made sure it comes from any of the sites. Then in the results, when the results come out, they can compare and see, is there any trend like that? Is it that, say, always when it comes from the corner, the participant wants more distance, and when it comes from the side, it wants less distance? They can check for any trends later, like if any confounding is occurring. That's why they make sure to give it from all sides. So this is what they call the 8 doors. So from there, that protagonist starts moving towards the participant, starts coming towards the center of the screen. Now, as a participant, what is my job? I have to keep on looking. Till now, I'm just looking at what is happening. Now, at this point, finally, once the figure has started moving towards me, I have to press the space bar at the point that I wanted to stop. So, as I had given the example earlier, let's say this is one trial which is going on. I see myself at the center, and let's say one figure has started coming from down towards me, and let's say I'm imagining this is an authority figure. Now, I don't want the authority figure to be very close towards me. So once the authority figure reaches here, like I'm imagining this is my teacher, I don't want her to come closer than this. So when the teacher reaches this point, that is the moving object comes here, I have to press the space bar to indicate stop. Then the screen will become blank. Once I press the space bar, the screen will go away. So now in the paper, they can be as specific as asking you which is the key which the participants had to press. Means you even have to memorize that they have to press space bar. It's not the enter key or the backspace or anything. They have to press space bar. To that extent, you have to memorize. Trust me, they can ask anything in the paper. Now, this process is repeated 96 times. A participant has to do 96 such trials, like that whole thing which we saw right from the friend screen till pressing the spacebar. So friend, stranger, whatever screen, then fixation, cross, then pressing the spacebar. This procedure the participant has to do 96 times in the study. Many students feel, my god, 96 times, it must be very lengthy. In fact, it's very brief, because like you saw the name, the first screen comes for 1 second, the fixation cross comes for 0.5 seconds. And this animation, I think this is also for 1 second. I'm not sure. Just check out in the original paper. And if I press the space bar, it will be less than 1 second also, because I'm stopping it before that second can get completed. So one trial is hardly taking 3, 4, 5 seconds or few seconds. So, and there are 96 trials, each of very few seconds. So within a few minutes, the whole experiment gets over. Now there are 96 total trials. There are 4 protagonists like we saw. Ball, stranger, authority figure and friend. Each is coming 3 times from each of 8 doors. So 4 protagonists, 8 doors, and each is coming 3 times from one door randomly. That means there are 96 trials in this study. This is how it comes to 96. So let's say, for example, this is the stick figure, this is a friend which is coming. On 3 trials, the friend will come from here. On 3 trials, the friend will come from here. On 3 trials, it will come from here. Means 3 trials, each of the 8 doors, it can come from randomly. Every time it won't be like friend is coming from this door, then next trial also friend is coming from, then next trial also friend. It's all mixed up. But in total, when we end the experiment, if we count, the friend has come 3 times from each door. Same way the stranger has come 3 times from each door, authority figure has come 3 times from each door, and the ball has come 3 times from each door in total. That is how we come up with 96 trials. So this is the task which is done on experiment 1. Now what is the dependent variable? What exactly are they measuring over here? What they do is, what the researchers have done, they have made the computer's inbuilt programs such that it automatically calculates the percentage of distance that we are maintaining from the protagonist. So let's say, for example, again, this is the computer screen, this is me. And on this trial, there was a friend who was coming from the corner towards me. I allowed the friend to come very close, like almost sticking with me. Now, this total distance which the friend walks, like right from the corner till, if the friend was to touch me, like right come on top of me, that is 100% distance, right? Because it's the total maximum possible distance that the protagonist can cover. Now, at what point have I stopped the friend? Supposing I've stopped the friend here. If the friend would have come another 3% close to me, we would have collided. So I have left only a distance of 3% between the friend and myself. So for this trial, the dependent variable, the distance which I have kept, will be counted as 3%. Now let's say there is another trial. Now this time, let's say it was a stranger who was coming towards me. So the stranger was coming. Stranger, I want him to stop here only. I don't want him to come closer than this. Like, I don't want him to come anywhere close to me. Now, if the stranger would have covered the full distance, right from the top till me, where I am standing, that would be 100%. But I have stopped the stranger at this point. Say where I have stopped him, if he would have moved 47% ahead more, then we would have collided. So for this trial, my interpersonal distance will be recorded as 47%. So how much ever distance I'm leaving between myself and the protagonist, how much ever distance more they would have to cover to collide with me, that distance is what the computer is recording. So it will make sense if less is the distance, like it's only 3%, means I like the figure to come closer. But if more is the distance, it's something like 47%, less I like the figure to come closer to me. So it was simple interpretation which the researchers can do. So 0% would mean colliding. 0% means I have not pressed the space bar at all. I have allowed the figure to collide with me, just dash with me. That would be closest proximity because I'm okay with touching also. So proximity just means nearness. Of course, most participants will not allow collision. No one wants anyone to come on top of them. But there could be like 2-3% distance only which they want from friends. That was possible. If 0% is there, collision is there, maybe the participant is not paying attention or they forgot to press the space bar. That possibility is there. Researchers account for such things. We don't have to get into the details of that. 100% proximity will mean I don't allow the figure to move at all. Like let's say the friend is standing here, the stranger is standing here. Moment I see them only I press the space bar. I don't let them cover even 1% of distance. That would be 100%. Again, most people won't select that. If they are pressing, maybe they've been in a haste and by mistake, they've kept their hand and by mistake they pressed it. But can be someone selecting 96-97%, that's possible. Like they're stopping the stranger authority figure very early on. That is possible. So if 100% is there, that's the furthest possible proximity, like most of distance that we would want from somebody. So usually participants select something between 0 and 100%. So that is the possible range of percentages which can be covered in one trial. Now many students ask this question, how would the trial end? Like how would the next trial begin? Either the participant presses a space bar, so the screen goes away at whatever point they've pressed the space bar and the next trial begins. So the next word comes up on the screen. Or if they are not pressing the space bar, like say participants not giving any response, we don't know why, but they're not pressing at all, then it will stop the moment collision happens. The protagonist comes on top of the central figure and the screen goes away. Because then it's a no response trial. The figure has moved 100% what it could move and the trial has ended. So these are the two possible ways in which the trial could have ended. Either at the point that the participant presses the space bar or at the point of collision, if there's no response from the participant. They do ask such questions in the paper also. Give two possibilities of when a trial could have ended. You have to know that. Okay, I don't have more time today. I will not be able to cover experiment 2. So I'll make another video in which I'll cover experiment 2, results and conclusion, and we'll do the practice questions. So this is a purely explanation video and this is all I have for today. If you have any comments, feedback, or suggestion, you can leave them in the comments box below. If you want to contact me for personal tuition, my phone number and email ID is there in the description box and pin comment below. So I hope to see you soon. Keep revising in the meanwhile till the next video comes. Goodbye.